I still remember the scent of lilies in the air, the soft lace against my skin, the whispered promise that I was finally part of a family. I stood at the altar, waiting, glowing, certain that love had found me. And then she walked in. Angela, my sister-in-law, in white. Not a word, just a flash drive dropped into my hand. 30 seconds later, my fiancé was gone. The priest dismissed the guests, and my future collapsed in silence. They thought I would break. They thought I would disappear. But I didn't. I became someone they wouldn't even recognize. And I waited. I used to believe that happiness came in crescents, moments that swelled gently into something whole. For a brief, glittering season, I lived inside one of those crescents. The air shimmered with promises, and my reflection in the mirror finally looked like someone who belonged. I was Emma Carter, OB-GYN, orphan-turned-doctor, bride-to-be of Daniel Prescott, the heir to one of the most powerful healthcare empires in the country. The world saw us as a golden couple, built from ambition and legacy, and I believed it. Angela Prescott, Daniel's older sister, was the kind of woman who stepped into a room like she owned gravity. She had sculpted cheekbones, a designer wardrobe curated for optics, and a network of admirers who whispered her name like a brand. She was also the one orchestrating our wedding down to the last silver ribbon. From the moment we got engaged, she insisted on helping. "You're family now," she had said, brushing a lock of hair behind my ear like a loving sister would. I had wanted to believe her. The night before the rehearsal dinner, she hosted a bridal soiree. Candlelight spilled across the garden, string quartets hummed beneath ivy arches, and Angela handed me a tiny gift box, no larger than a velvet ring case. "Just a little something," she said, smiling like a secret. Inside was a flash drive shaped like a rose gold heart. "Play it tonight," she whispered. "It's something Daniel left for you. Sentimental fool." I waited until midnight, curled in silk sheets, the scent of roses still lingering in my hair. I plugged the drive into my laptop with a flutter in my chest. The video began with music, piano, soft, familiar. A montage played. Daniel and I walking hand in hand through the hospital garden, laughing over takeout, dancing in my kitchen. It was our story, told in snapshots, and for a minute I thought, how lucky I am. Then the video cut. The next frame was grainy, a hospital room, a younger me, gaunt, eyes hollow, lying on a stretcher. The camera angle shifted and I heard it. My voice, crying, begging. The timestamp read 7 years ago. The words echoed. "I can't keep it, please. I just want this to be over." I stopped breathing. The screen faded to black. Then Angela's voice, calm and crisp. "Marriage is built on truth. You should have told him." I didn't sleep. I didn't speak. At dawn, I walked to Daniel's suite, heart pounding like a funeral drum. He opened the door in a white button-down, no tie, no smile. His face was unreadable. "I know everything," he said. "Why didn't you tell me?" "It was before I even met you," I stammered. "It was a different life. I was 19. I was alone." "You said you've always been honest," he said quietly. "You made me look like a fool." I reached for his hand. He stepped back. "I need space." By noon, his family lawyer contacted me. The wedding was postponed. By 4, it was canceled. And by nightfall, the media had the story. Runaway bride had secret abortion passed. Prescott wedding called off amid scandal. They didn't just cancel my wedding. They assassinated my name. Anonymous sources claimed I'd forged my medical school records. Photos of me from college parties surfaced, edited to show syringes in my purse. The hospital board suspended my license pending investigation. Anonymous patients accused me of malpractice. My home was vandalized, red paint on the door, liar in scrubs. Through it all, Angela remained untouched. Her public statement was a masterclass in calculated sorrow. "We love Emma, but trust is the foundation of our family. We hope she finds healing." 2 months later, she married Senator Lowell Hart, the rising star of the conservative right. She wore white. Vogue called it the redemption wedding. In the photos, she cradled her belly in one shot. A baby was on the way. Meanwhile, I sold my car to pay legal fees. I slept on a friend's couch until the tabloids stopped calling. And then I disappeared. No announcement, no farewell post, no closure, just a letter, tucked under Angela's doormat, sealed in black wax. You took everything I had. I'll see you again, when I have nothing left to lose and you have everything to fear. The air in the mountains of Mindanao tasted of ash and disinfectant. There were no cathedrals, no wedding bells, no perfect white dresses, just canvas tents, screams swallowed by monsoon winds, and the sharp smell of iodine. I became Ava Chen here, under an assumed identity provided by a field operative with too many secrets and not enough regrets. He taught me how to erase Emma Carter from every system. In less than a week, I didn't exist anymore. I worked with war survivors, victims of landmines and airstrikes. My hands stitched skin across trauma I couldn't name. Some nights, I operated by flashlight. Others, I stayed awake cataloging shipments of antibiotics under false invoices so they wouldn't be seized by local militias. I didn't ask where the funding came from, and they didn't ask who I used to be. One of the field doctors, a woman named Saria, once caught me staring too long at a scarred little girl missing an eye. She leaned over and whispered, "You think saving others will erase your pain. It won't, but it'll keep you breathing long enough to outgrow it." 3 years passed like a fever dream. My Mandarin sharpened. I learned to move between borders and speak the dialects of politics, poverty, and pharmaceutical black markets. I became fluent in strategy. One day, a boy with a bullet lodged near his spine clutched my wrist before surgery. He looked into my eyes, too old for his age. "You can save a village," he said. "But why won't you save yourself?" I couldn't answer. Then the news came. A coded message from a contact embedded in the U.S. Department of Treasury. One line. Angela Prescott's assets frozen. Husband arrested for fraud. Son diagnosed with mitochondrial disorder. My hands trembled. The boy on my table survived. I didn't say goodbye. I simply walked away from the tent, the village, the mountains, burned my gloves in a steel barrel, and booked a one-way flight to New York under the name Ms. Yuhan Zhao, a Chinese angel investor with ties to the biotech industry. I didn't bring luggage. I didn't need to. I'd already packed every grudge I had. By the time I landed, the Prescott name was bleeding on the business pages. Their flagship clinic in Manhattan was under investigation for false claims. Angela hadn't been seen in weeks. Her political husband was outed for laundering funds through shell charities. Their child, a boy named Isaac, was quietly admitted to a pediatric genetics facility under an alias. I made contact through an old medical associate now working in venture capital. I pitched myself as a private investor representing a Hong Kong-based fund interested in reviving American medical legacy institutions. My Mandarin accent was perfect, cultivated during years of code switching in the field. I dyed my hair black. I wore muted designer suits, never the same twice. Angela's clinic was hanging by a thread. Their boardroom smelled of desperation, masked with lavender oil diffusers. Angela entered in a cream blazer 2 sizes too large. Her weight had dropped, but her mask of poise was still intact. She didn't recognize me. She saw what I wanted her to see, an opportunity. "We need $3 million in bridge capital to avoid foreclosure," she said, voice measured but hoarse. I nodded slowly. "In exchange, we'll need full access to your operational and financial infrastructure, all patient data, all historical accounts." She hesitated. "That's highly confidential." I smiled. "So is survival." 2 days later, I walked into her office to deliver the first installment. On her desk sat a framed photo of Isaac, big brown eyes, a feeding tube taped gently to his cheek. My stomach twisted. I hadn't planned for him. I hadn't expected innocence to live among the wreckage she left behind. "He's on the transplant list," Angela murmured, noticing my gaze. "It's genetic. He needs mitochondrial support therapy, but it's expensive." I kept my voice even. "We can help, but we'll need your signature on the revised terms." She signed, and just like that, I held the soul of her empire between my fingers. She had no idea. It started with a shell company in Luxembourg, then another in Singapore, a trust in the Cayman Islands. By the time the final transaction cleared, the Prescott Medical Group was no longer majority owned by Angela or her crumbling circle of silent investors. They didn't even notice the takeover. The stock price dipped incrementally, just enough to stir quiet panic, but not enough to expose the predator behind the shift. I was the predator. Through Zhao Holdings, Ava Capital, and 3 other layers of offshore noise, I purchased control of the empire that once spit me out like disease. Not in one dramatic stroke, but slowly, precisely, like an IV drip of acid into marble. Angela's name remained on the building, Prescott Women's and Children's Center, but only because I needed her face. She was photogenic, desperate, and no longer capable of independent thought. I turned her into a brand, a puppet. Every camera angle was curated, every interview scripted. She smiled when I told her to, cried on cue, talked about resilience and motherhood like she invented the concepts. Behind closed doors, she withered. I watched her fumble through presentations, misread financials, forget her own staff's names. The board saw a woman slipping. I saw a woman broken, exactly where I left her. Daniel didn't fare much better. After his indictment was quietly dismissed, thanks to a backroom plea deal that pinned everything on rogue accountants, he returned to the hospital thinking his name still carried weight. It didn't. I had him reassigned to pediatrics administration, a glorified clipboard role that made him grind his teeth in silence. He walked through the halls like a ghost, and no one noticed he was fading. One afternoon, I found him staring at the donor wall near the lobby, eyes tracing the names of men he once called colleagues. He didn't look at me when I passed. He didn't know who I was anymore. Neither did I. At night, I sat in the executive suite, looking out at the city from the 42nd floor. The skyline blinked like a heart monitor. I had power, total surgical control over the place that once tried to bury me. But there was no vindication, no glee. Just stillness, cold and precise. Until Isaac. The boy had been moved to a private research wing I funded personally. His case fascinated me, not just medically, but instinctively. I watched him through a pane of glass as he worked with his physical therapist, stubborn and small, like a phoenix refusing to yield to fire. Something pulled at me, a thread I couldn't name. I requested his full genetic workup. Technically, I wasn't supposed to, but rules were for people with names. When the file arrived, I read it once, then again. My blood chilled. Isaac's mitochondrial DNA matched Daniel's as expected, but there was a partial sequence, fragile, twisted, faint, that mirrored my own. It wasn't possible, except it was. I contacted a private lab in Geneva, used encrypted channels to send both our samples, mine under an alias. The result came back within 72 hours. The sequence wasn't inheritance, it was extraction. They had taken it from me, years ago, from my body when I was a teenager in the state foster system, before I had a voice, before I had teeth. The pieces snapped into place like broken glass sliding back into a frame. The research scholarship I'd been offered in undergrad, funded by the Prescott Foundation. The weird tests, the blood draws, the silence afterward. They had harvested my genetic material for mitochondrial research, the same project now used to treat Isaac, the same project Daniel oversaw when he worked in bioethics at Stanford, the same one Angela filed patents for under her name 2 years after I disappeared. Suddenly, everything made sense. Daniel's courtship, Angela's sabotage. The wedding wasn't ruined out of spite. It was aborted like an experiment gone off script. They hadn't feared my lies. They feared my DNA. They feared me. I printed out the full research trail, funding sources, trial results, patent filings, all tied to my name in fragmented code. I could destroy them, take down the entire Prescott dynasty, burn it from the roots up. I sat in my office, fingers hovering over the encrypted email draft addressed to a journalist at The Guardian. I imagined the headline, "Medical Empire Built on Orphan Tissue Scandal." My thumb twitched. Then I heard Isaac laugh. It was faint, muffled through glass, but sharp enough to crack the walls of my resolve. He was still innocent, still tethered to a bloodline he didn't choose. If I exposed the truth, he would carry the stain, not them. I closed the email, for now. Angela sat across from me in the conference room, smaller than I remembered. The sharp lines of her jaw had softened, her eyes sunken with fatigue and something else, humility maybe, or fear. The room was sterile, all glass and chrome, but the air felt thick with everything we hadn't said for 10 years. "I know who you are," she said finally, voice shaking. "I knew the moment Isaac said your name in his sleep." I didn't respond. I slid a manila folder across the table toward her. She opened it with trembling hands, eyes scanning the genetic data, the timestamps, the embedded signatures. "This is him," I said. "Isaac carries mitochondrial sequences harvested from me, not inherited, taken, illegally. Your family knew. You knew." Angela didn't argue. Her fingers hovered over a photo in the report, a blurred image of a younger me in a hospital gown. "You could have destroyed us." "I still could." Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. "Please, I don't care about the company anymore. The name, the money. I just want my son to live." I leaned back in the chair. "Then tell me, Angela, do you want the truth, or do you want his life?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Words failed her. "He deserves both," she whispered. "He won't survive both," I replied. Angela broke. She slumped forward, burying her face in her hands, sobbing without grace or rhythm. "I hated you," she choked, "because you were everything I wasn't. Daniel loved you without calculation. My father saw you as the heir I couldn't be. But I never wanted this to happen to Isaac. I never wanted him to pay for what we did." I stood, walked to the door, paused. I reached into my pocket and placed something on the table. Angela looked up, blinking through wet lashes. The ring, my engagement ring, still polished, still gleaming, still hers to remember. I left her there, alone with the symbol of everything she tried to steal and everything I refused to let her keep. By the end of the week, I had a meeting with a man from the Office of Medical Ethics, a division buried deep within the Department of Health and Human Services. He greeted me without pleasantries, sliding a non-disclosure agreement across the table. "You give us everything," he said. "The research files, the DNA chain, the funding trails. In return, we guarantee immunity. You walk away clean." "And them?" I asked. "Angela will face corporate liability and obstruction. Daniel's already under surveillance. His mental health has deteriorated." I thought of Daniel's eyes in that hallway, blank, distant, like someone watching the world from behind glass. "I want 2 conditions," I said. 1, Isaac gets access to real treatment, outside the Prescott Foundation's reach. 2, my name stays buried, no press, no profile, no recognition. The man raised a brow. "You don't want credit?" "I want silence." He nodded. A week later, Angela was arrested under federal charges. She didn't resist. She didn't even speak. Daniel had been found wandering a hospital corridor in his slippers, whispering to imaginary nurses. They sedated him. He never asked for me. The Prescott name crumbled within months. Headlines swirled, lawsuits filed, investors fled. I watched it happen from a quiet cafe in Geneva, drinking black tea while reading American news in French. Then came the invitation, a letter embossed with the seal of the World Medical Ethics Council. They wanted me, Ava Chen, to serve on their oversight board. Your experience in data transparency and patient rights makes you uniquely qualified. They didn't know the half of it. I stared at the envelope in my hands that night, alone in a rented apartment overlooking the Rhone. There was a photo on the table beside me, a worn snapshot from my first year of med school. Emma Carter in a white coat 2 sizes too big, smiling like someone who still believed in clean slates. I whispered into the silence, "Emma is dead, but Ava will make sure they never do this again." The penthouse overlooked 3 rivers and 5 embassies, a cold masterpiece of brushed steel and marble, decorated by someone paid to make it feel less like a mausoleum. I rarely noticed the skyline anymore. I rarely noticed anything. The world praised Ava Chen, strategist, ethicist, the quiet architect behind reforms in global biotech. They whispered my name in Geneva, bowed to it in Singapore, printed it in gold at international symposiums, but no one said Emma. Emma was a ghost, a soft voice buried beneath a persona too powerful to risk vulnerability. Still, at night, when the light fractured through the glass walls and cast broken reflections across the floor, I saw her. She came in dreams, sometimes in the white coat from med school, sometimes in her hospital scrubs, blood splattered across trembling hands, but always with the same smile, gentle, uncertain, hopeful. A smile that belonged to a girl who believed in redemption. And then she'd vanish, fading before I could ask why she kept returning. I didn't tell anyone about the dreams. My staff would have called it exhaustion. My advisors would have urged a vacation. The council would have cited burnout. But I knew the truth. The more power I held, the louder Emma's silence became. Then, one morning, I found Isaac in the building's private lobby. A security guard called to say a boy was asking for me by name. I went down, expecting a media plant or a mistake. But there he was, 12 years old now. Thinner than I remembered, eyes darker, voice deeper. He didn't ask to come up. He simply looked at me and said, "Are you my mother?" The world fell quiet. I led him into the lounge, hands numb, brain blank. We sat across from each other on opposite ends of a couch worth more than my childhood foster home. "Why do you think that?" I asked carefully. He reached into his backpack and pulled out a folder. Inside was a collage. Photos, reports, a printed image of the DNA report I thought I had buried. "I found this," he said. "I know it's not real, but I remember things, dreams, smells, your voice." I wanted to deny it. Every instinct told me to deflect, control, redirect. But something in me cracked. "Did your mother tell you those dreams were real?" I asked. He shook his head. "She told me you were dangerous, that you'd steal me, but I don't believe her." I stared at him. "I'll order a new test," I said. "A full panel. Truth deserves evidence." He nodded. The results arrived 48 hours later. I read them alone in my study, the only place I still allowed myself to feel. Negative. No biological link. But something else. Buried deep in the neural analysis logs from a pediatric trauma specialist, emotional implant therapy, artificial memory suggestion, guided by pharmacological triggers and psychological reinforcement. Angela had paid someone to plant me in his dreams. She had made him love a stranger, fear her, yearn for her, all to ensure his loyalty, his protection, his silence. And I, unknowingly, had become a part of that manipulation. I had leaned into his gaze. I had allowed the fantasy to live because it fed something hollow in me I wasn't ready to name. I had become her. The realization sliced deeper than any revenge ever had. I walked to the mirror and stared at my own face, the cheekbones sharper now, the eyes colder, the mouth rarely used for smiling. Ava was who I built to survive, but Emma was who Isaac remembered. He came back 2 days later. I invited him in, offered tea like it was a normal reunion. "I'm not your mother," I told him gently, "but I wish I had been. I would have fought for you from the beginning." He looked down, then up again. "So? Everything I felt, it was fake?" "No, I said. Feelings are real, even if they come from lies. Silence. Then he asked, "Can I still visit you?" I nodded. Before he left, he turned in the doorway. "Why do grown-ups lie so much?" I didn't answer immediately. Then I said, "Because we're afraid the truth will cost us what we love." He nodded slowly, then whispered, "I hate her sometimes, my mom, but I think I hate all of you a little." I knelt beside him, eye to eye. "You have every right," I said, "to hate her, to hate me, to hate what we did to your mind. And maybe one day, you'll decide none of us deserve forgiveness. That's your choice." His lip trembled. "And if I don't hate you?" "Then I'll spend the rest of my life trying to be someone worthy of that." He hugged me. A first, and perhaps a last. After he left, I sat in the dark and cried, not for vengeance or justice or even loss, but for the terrifying truth that I had inherited everything I once swore to destroy. And power, when held too long, becomes the very prison you once escaped. I wrote the letter in longhand over 3 nights alone in the shadow of a shuttered city. I didn't name names. I didn't seek revenge. I told the story as it happened, mine and theirs. The trials, the theft, the betrayal, the experiments no one consented to, the children born from secrets, the woman shaped by lies and sharpened by grief. I didn't sign it. Instead, I sealed it inside a plain envelope and mailed it to every major news outlet I could find. Then I packed 1 suitcase, a single notebook, and my expired medical license. I booked a seat on a humanitarian flight bound for Côte d'Ivoire. I didn't leave a forwarding address. At 38,000 feet, somewhere above the Atlantic, I unfolded the in-flight newspaper. I wasn't looking for anything, but there it was, page 5, bottom corner. Unnamed doctor exposes genetic experiments spanning 2 decades. No byline, no photograph, just a single pulse. Quote, "They buried the bodies beneath paperwork and called it progress." I let out a slow breath. A flight attendant passed with coffee. I declined. I was too full of a strange peace, unfamiliar but welcome. Outside the window, the sky burned gold against the curve of the earth. I imagined Emma somewhere in that light, young again, clean, untouched by the corridors of power. She didn't need her name to matter. She just needed the truth to survive her. Weeks passed. I found work in a refugee camp outside Bouaké. The clinic was small, the equipment outdated, the electricity unreliable. But the people were real. The pain was real. And the healing felt truer than anything I'd touched in years. One morning I was bandaging a girl's shoulder when a young voice behind me said, "Is it true you used to be someone important?" I turned. A girl, mid-20s, sharp eyes, steady hands, stood there in wrinkled scrubs, holding a tablet. "I read the article," she said softly. "It changed me. I dropped out of private practice. Came here instead." I raised an eyebrow. "Because of an anonymous story?" She smiled. "Because of a truth someone risked everything to tell." I said nothing. She didn't push. Later that evening, she passed me a cup of ginger tea and added, almost like a whisper, "I became a doctor. Because of a woman I'll never meet." I didn't correct her. There was nothing to correct. The story had found a life beyond me. Months turned into years. Project Emma became more than myth. It became a movement. One that fought medical corruption, demanded informed consent, and brought justice to forgotten patients. Clinics opened in countries that had long been left behind. Young doctors carried the emblem, a feather set in flame, stitched into their coats. They didn't know who Emma was. They didn't need to. Her legacy wasn't in her name. It was in every patient saved because someone once refused to stay silent. And Isaac, he grew. He studied medicine, not in America, but in Nairobi, where he said the system still had space for honesty. He carried a weathered photo in his wallet, a picture of me, taken before I knew what the world could do to a woman like me. He spoke at conferences, translated protocols for displaced communities, created alliances across borders. He refused to work for governments. He never mentioned the Prescott name. Once during an interview, a journalist asked, "Who inspired you?" He held up the photo. "She told me something when I was 12, he said. She said, "You can't save the world, but you can save one person, and maybe that person will save someone else." He paused, and I believed her. I watched the clip on a borrowed tablet in the back of a Jeep, somewhere between two crumbling roads. I didn't cry, but I closed my eyes, and in the silence, I thanked the girl I used to be, the one who was left at the altar, the one who burned and rebuilt herself from ash, and the one who finally let herself disappear.